Hello everyone. So I had posted the point-based system updates when UK government released it with the detailed statement, and in that I had explained about the ICT switching and a few more rules. But I said the salary threshold needs a few examples to be understood. So I was creating an Excel file and I've created it with a few examples and calculations to show you clearly, what the salary threshold actually means and how you can earn points. But before we look at that, a lot of you have been asking me questions on emails and comments, and especially in the last couple of days, I probably got about 100 emails with repeating questions. A lot of questions are similar questions, and different people had asked it. I had answered a few of them, but there were too many emails and I couldn't answer all of them. So what I've done is I've collated all the questions and kind of prepared 10 commonly asked questions, and I've tried to answer those questions in Excel, and then I'm going to talk about those questions. I'm going to give you those answers as first part of the video. And once we are done with those common questions, then we'll go into the Excel with the salary calculation. So let's start with the most basic question that people have been asking me, like, what is the major difference between Tier 2 General and the new points-based system? Because Tier 2 General was always there. People can always, companies can always sponsor employees and bring them on Tier 2 General. So what's the major difference apart from the Tier 2 ICT switching without the cooling off period, which we spoke about? What's the benefit for everyone else? The key difference is that there is no labor market test. There is no resident labor market test, which is RLMT, which is basically a test to make sure that the employer was not able to employ somebody in the UK market, which is also open to the EU, and prove that they were not able to hire anyone locally. So, they have to advertise the job locally in a job site, in all the job sites. They will have to interview people and make sure they will demonstrate that they were not able to hire anyone locally before they are able to go ahead and give a Tier 2 job to somebody else. So this was a major hindrance for people where they were not able to bring fresh talent from outside of UK because of this resident labor market test. And this has been removed. This requirement has been removed in the new points-based system, which is a major thing, because now they can bring in people with no experience. Because how do you bring people with no experience or fresh graduates and then prove that you were not able to get anyone for the job within UK, because you could have trained anyone in UK. So now that has been removed, you can practically bring anyone that you actually want to bring. You don't have any other requirements. As long as you can afford to give the salary that the government asks you to give, you can just bring anyone. That's the major difference between Tier 2 General and the points-based system. And again, as far as I know, there is no cap here. So they could, if they want to bring 100 people, they can bring 100 people from India or from any country for that matter, wherever they can find the cost-effective resources. So the combination of these two, being able to hire an IT company, an ICT employee who's already in UK, or being able to bring someone from India easily, the combination of these two should create more employers having licenses, having the license to hire people, because there are only about 30 to 32,000 people, employers who have sponsorship license now. And these two changes effectively will increase the number of employers being able to get people and employers having more licenses. So this will also allow consultancy type companies where they're not end users. They don't want to hire people for their own needs, but they're basically hiring people for having a contract with the client and supplying people to them, supplying resources to them. So those kind of consulting companies earlier were not able to bring people because of this resident labor market test. Now they can actually bring people in and keep them on bench even if they want to, if they can afford the salaries. And then they can use them as and when they want, like an Indian company basically, so they can do that. The second major question that people had asked is, will PBS allow settlement or ILR? What happens if you switch from ICT to PBS, points-based system? So yeah, points-based system is being created for settlement process. So it will definitely allow settlement. Like all the other settlement routes, like Tier 2 General or, HSMP before that, Tier 1 after that. All of the settlement routes that have existed in UK the last few years, the criteria is that if you are in that settlement visa for 5 years, if you work in that settlement visa for 5 years, then you will get a ILR. And after 5 years, you are eligible to apply for a ILR. And after being in ILR for 1 year, you can get a citizenship. It's a very clear path. So there is one sub question to this. I have already stayed in ICT. Will my years count? they've clearly mentioned that the ICT years don't count, which is why that table is also there saying that ICT is not eligible for settlement. So those years don't matter. So for example, if you're in UK for 3 years in ICT and then you move into PBS, you will have to spend a total of 8 years. 5 years will start only from the time that you moved into PBS. But they might bring in an expedite special case scenario for people who've spent already 4-5 years in UK and they're switching, because that means that they're going to spend nearly 10 years, and 10 years long-term settlement visa is another option for ILR. So there might be a special case consideration. As of now, it's not there. So this was a bit confusing in the settlement option for the ICT, because in ICT, it was saying that settlement is not there. That is, if you're continuing to be in ICT without switching into PBS. So that section was only for ICT. So the next question is, when we speculated earlier in the initial days when the visa was being laid out, there was a possibility that you could come to UK without a job offer, without a sponsor. I came to UK, for example, 13 years back through the HSMP program, where there was no sponsor, no job offer. I was able to get my own visa, come to UK and then search for a job, and I could work for anybody. Now, page number 26.59, they've said that when it opens in January 2021, 1st January, this route will not exist. But they're still working with the recommendations from MAC, and they are going to probably roll this out later. So the timeline is not there, but they've not ruled it out, saying that it's not going to be there. So obviously, when there is news about it, I'll update it, but at the moment it's not there. So the other question is tier 2 general switching to points-based system, or to to another job or to another sponsor within the points-based system. Can I switch? So page number 25, points 53, 54 and 55 have clarified it very clearly that you can switch. You can switch from tier 2 general. Also, when you come into points-based system, you can switch from one job to another or one sponsor to another. But remember, you'll have to go through the entire application process again, and you will need to score the 70 points. So you'll need to prove everything. Like for example, if your salary threshold gave you 20 points in the first job with the first sponsor, and you decide to switch to another sponsor or another job, the second job should also give you 20 points for your salary threshold. You need to still score 70 points again if you want to switch. And again, if you be in the tier 2 general, you can already go through and get your ILR. But for some reason, if you want to switch employers and you want to switch from a tier 2 general sponsor to a points-based system after Jan 2021, then you will again have to go through the 70-point eligibility process. So for example, in your tier 2 general, if you're earning less than the salary threshold, doesn't matter because you're in a tier 2 general. But if you want to switch to a points-based system, that means your salary threshold needs to be meeting the 70-point criteria. So you will need to make sure that you are able to satisfy all the threshold criteria and get the 70 points. English language requirement alone, we'll cover it in the next point. But that's practically it. You are able to switch to any employer who has a valid sponsorship license, but you just need to go through the entire process again with the points table. English language requirements, a lot of people had asked, what is the criteria? So they have actually laid out 3 criteria, 3 ways in which you can get the English language requirement satisfied. This is mandatory. So especially for Indians and for non-English nations, right? So the 2 main criteria. The third one is basically redundant criteria. So the 2 main criteria is, one, we've already talked about it in our channel, where if your academic degree was taught in English in India, you can get it recognized by UK NARIC. UK NARIC is a website where it gives you a comparison statement. And based on the comparison of your degree, it will tell you whether your degree was taught in a CEFR framework, which means that they give you English language assessment requirement certificate. So you can use that for demonstrating your English proficiency. If your degree was not taught in English, or if UK NARIC says that your degree is not recognized, or if you've done only diploma and you've not completed a degree in India, for any of those reasons, if you're not able to get the UK NARIC, then you have to write the IELTS, and you have to write IELTS General. IELTS Academic is required for your university admissions, but IELTS General is enough for English language proficiency, and you need to pass your English language test. So on top of this, if you are going to be working in, like for example, if you're going to be working as a nurse, then your professional body like NMC, Midwifery Council, they have a further English language requirement. Like for example, if you've done your UK NARIC, that's sufficient for the visa for the points-based system. But NMC will require you to write your IELTS or your OET and get certified to a certain level, which means that your professional body, the workplace that you're going to join, they might have a higher English language requirement. So a few people had asked that I've done schooling in a different language like Tamil or Hindi or for that example, but university was in English. That should be okay because UK NARIC only checks the university. So if you've been in UK under ICT, you still need to show English language proof because working in UK as an ICT is not sufficient. If you have submitted your English language assessment already for any other visa like Tier 2 General or something like that, then you can say that I've submitted my English language proof for another visa, that will be accepted. But otherwise, you still need to submit your English language proof. Just working in UK as an ICT is not sufficient. If you've done UK UG and PG both, but you don't have your PG certificates, it doesn't matter. UG is enough because only one certificate is required to get the UK NARIC comparison. You're not going to get more points just because you have 2 or 3 certificates or 2 or 3 degrees. It's just a yes or no statement. If you've done distant learning, for example, I don't think this is accepted because the proficiency is not proven if you've not gone to the university and not attended the classes and had the exposure and the discussion. The next question is basically a switching concern which people have because the page number 42 for table for ICT intercompany transfer makes it a bit muddled because it says that there is a mention of a meet cooling off period and there is also a mention of not applicable for settlement and all that. So the cooling off period that they're talking about in that table for page 44 in the ICT is basically for if you work in ICT for 5 years and go back to India, then you have a cooling off period for coming back in another ICT visa. Like, you work for an IT company for 5 years and you go back to India, then you're supposed to be in India for 12 months before you can come back through another ICT term. But that's the cooling off period that they're talking about. Again, settlement, same concept. If you stay in ICT, then you're not eligible for settlement. Only if you switch to a settlement visa like a points-based system visa, then you are eligible for a settlement, which is what that table is talking about. If you want a comparison, you can compare it page number 42 where the visitor visa table is there, and that will make it easier for you to understand that the table is basically talking about all the restrictions within an ICT, not if you switch. All that we are bothered about is whether you are able to switch within UK or not, which they have clarified that you're able to switch within UK. Again, point number 108 about 5 years and 6 year period, all that applies to staying in the UK within the ICT, not for switching. You are able to switch, that's what they've made it clear. So the next point is if you're already working for an employer, like people have been already working for a tier 2 general employer, for example, or tier 2 dependents have been working in a company and they are willing to sponsor them. Or even the ICT companies, right? They are willing to sponsor a points-based system. And because the RLMT is not there, they are able to easily sponsor. What used to happen was even before this is possible. So companies who hire dependents, for example, if they want to give them a tier 2 general, they have to create a job for them. And before they can offer them a role, they have to demonstrate that this job is for them. So they'll have to publish it, like I said, conduct interviews, reject candidates. Basically not ethical, but they used to do it. And then they used to basically say that only this person is eligible for that job and we have to hire this person, offer them that job. And using that job offer is when they'll get a tier 2 general job. Now that resident labor market test is not there, they can straight away create a job, they can offer it to this person and they can hire that person. And this is very simple. So all they need to do is just get a sponsorship license. So the sponsorship license process is also very straightforward and probably become more and more straightforward because a large number of employers will now come forward to get the sponsorship license. So applying for a sponsorship license also doesn't cost a big fortune. If it's a medium company, for example, I think in one of my videos I mentioned it costs like less than £1,000, and even for a small medium to large company, it costs like less than £2,000 for getting a sponsorship license. So it's not that expensive. So even ICT employees, as long as the ICT company wants to hire them directly, they can create a UK based job and they can hire that employee and give them a job offer, and they can use the same job offer in the same place that they're working to go and get the points-based system visa. So next question is about, this is again a bit tricky because people have been saying that, my visa is expiring, I'm in ICT and I'm already in UK. My visa is expiring before December 2020 in October, September. What options do I have? What is the start date of this visa? One thing is, if you go back to India, you can still apply from India. ICT switching, the cooling off period doesn't apply, because even if you go back to India, it's still the same. You can still apply as soon as the visa opens, like in Jan 2021. Also, the visa cost is slightly cheaper if you apply from India. I think it's about 120 pounds, 150 pounds cheaper if you apply from India. So as soon as the application process starts, you can actually start applying from, even if you've gone back to India. But we're not sure about the exact definitive date when the application process can start, because the visa validity is going to be from Jan 2021. For sure, the application will start from Jan 2021. But they have mentioned it in a few places in prior as well, that the processing could start before that, like it could start in October 2020, for example. So having a 2-month gap before the visa processing concludes, so visas can be ready by Jan 2021. So technically, you could apply for the visa, and when the processing is in progress, there is a clause which says that if your visa processing is in progress, you can stay in UK. So if your visa expires in October 2020, you could stay. But what happens if the visa comes in, let's say, November 2020, and your ICT is not valid anymore, and your PBS visa doesn't start till Jan 2021, which means that technically you can't be in the company during that December period. So there's a lot of permutations, combinations, and also, because of COVID, the visa offices could be closed, where you intend to start your visa processing in October, but you may not be able to start because the visa processing offices are closed. So I think the safest thing to do is, if you have no other options like your tier 4 or whatever it is, the safest thing to do is just to go back and apply from India. But if you're able to find an option, then you can basically work it out. So the next question people had asked was, do I need a solicitor or a lawyer or agency to pay additional fees for them? I don't think so, because the process is very well defined and very clear. You're basically wasting your money if you're going to pay an agency or a lawyer for like 3,000, 4,000 pounds. Normally is what they would charge. The fees is well laid out in page number 61 of this document as well. I had come to UK through the HSNP, like I said, and I've never used an agency or a lawyer or paid fees to anybody else apart from the Home Office. Most of the friends that I know of who've come to UK have also never used an agency. There is no need to use an agency. The UK Home Office visa processing is very, very clear and straightforward. Once you start the process, everything is really self-guided and very easy to follow. So unless and until you're not very familiar with the application forms, and you're not familiar with any of this process, and you have money to spare, you have money to burn, you can actually go ahead and use an agency. You're free to use it if you want to. The last one is a bit tricky again. What if my ICT employer is unwilling to help, and if they find out, they would ask me to go back, or they could stop my process. They could do that. Some of the ICT employers, because they're spending money and they're investing in the employees and bringing them to UK, they don't want to let them go. They don't want them to stay in UK. So they could basically say that if they find out that your visa processing, you're pursuing a points-based system, they could basically say that, no, you have to go back to India. And if your visa processing hasn't started, if you've not submitted it, if you're still in the initial stages of finding a sponsor, then you have to go back. There is not much of an option. But once your visa processing has started, and then your employer is saying that your ICT employer is saying that you have to go back, you could quit and you could stay in UK till your visa processing is completed. But again, these are chances that you have to take. So this is a bit sticky situation, that I would say. So now let's look at the Excel. So what I've done is I've basically taken the page number 17 points table that they've clarified with regards to the salary. And I've created two scenarios or two sections, one for people who are not new entrants and one for people who are new entrants. We defined what a new entrant is in the previous video. So, those three categories, if they meet it, they're a new entrant. If not, they're not a new entrant. So in both of these sections, both of these categories, there are two scenarios to consider. So I'm going to use these two scenarios to demonstrate the examples and show you the calculations. Now, we made some basic assumption. The basic assumption is that we're not including, or we're not considering the PhD in STEM subject, because that's a very niche category. So that's probably going to confuse it a little bit. So I'm excluding that one scenario alone from this whole calculation. So the scenario one is if for your job, like for example, the IT manager job, if you go to that document and look for IT manager, the IT project manager job has a going rate of 20 points. Going salary of 40,000 pounds annually. So which means that if you lay out this table, your general salary threshold, your 10-point salary threshold, 20-point salary threshold of this 20,000, 23,000, 25,000, they don't apply at all because your going rate is higher than your 25,600, which means that all you're bothered about is your going rate from that point onwards. So which means if you get a salary of 40,000 pounds, then you will get the 20 points and you are automatically qualified. If you get a salary of 37,000 pounds like Bob here, then you only get 10 points, but you're still qualified. But you need to still get 10 points from somewhere else. So which means that your job should, you should either have done a PhD and your job is relevant to your PhD, or your job should be in a shortage occupation. If your salary is only 33,000 pounds, which is only 80% or which is greater than 80%, you get no points, but you barely qualified for the points-based system, which means you still need 20 points. So that 20 points would only come from, in that scenario, from a shortage occupation. So your job should be in like a nurse or something else. Your job should be listed in the shortage occupation at that point, not just now. Even at that point, in January 2021, your job should be listed in the shortage occupation by MAC, which means that you will secure the 20 points. This is only if your salary is higher than 33,000 pounds, which is 80% of the going rate of your salary, which is your, for an IT manager is 40,000 and 80% of that is 32,000. If your salary that is offered for an IT project manager is, let's say, 31,950, nothing matters because your salary is less than the 80% of the going rate. So you don't qualify at all at that point. Even if your job is in a shortage occupation, if it's listed in a shortage occupation, you've done PhD, nothing else matters because your salary threshold does not meet the minimum requirement for you to qualify. So even though that 31,950 is technically more than the 20-point fixed salary threshold of 25,600, it does not matter because going rate is higher here, and the going rate is what determines your eligibility at this point. So your 31,950 in this scenario will not get you a qualification for points-based system. Theoretically, most of the employers will know this as well when we do this calculation, and they will definitely offer you more salary than this. But because you are applying for the points-based system visa from your money, because the employer would have applied for the sponsorship license and paid for the sponsorship license, and you are expected to pay for your points-based system visa. We don't want to really end up in a situation where your visa is getting rejected because of these things. So that's why I put in this calculations. So in the scenario where your going rate is less than 25,600, this is, for example, for a hairdresser or for a saloon manager, in that same document, they've said the going rate is only 19,300 pounds. The minute the going rate is less than 25,600, the going rate is completely irrelevant at that point. From that point onwards, what is relevant is the fixed salary thresholds. So the general salary threshold of 2480, 10-point salary threshold of 23,040, and 20-point salary threshold of 25,600. So if you get a salary of 26,000, if you're offered a salary of 26,000, you are earning higher than the 20-point salary threshold. So you qualify and you also get the 20 points. That's it, job done, you're eligible. If your salary offer is 24,000, for example, you get only 10 points because it is higher than the 10-point salary threshold but lower than the 20-point salary threshold. So you're qualified and you get 10 points, but you still need 10 more points, which again means that you should have done a PhD relevant to the job. I mean, you could do a PhD relevant to hairdressing, but that's just an example that I've given. Or your job should be listed in a shortage occupancy list. Either way, you need 10 points. If your salary is 20,500, like 20 pounds higher than your general salary threshold of 2480, for example, then you are still eligible. You have the salary threshold eligibility, but you still need 20 points now because you get 0 points for that 10-point salary threshold. I mean, for the minimum salary threshold, which means the only option is your job should be listed in the shortage occupation list if your salary is 20,500, for example. If you get a salary of 20,300 in this scenario, even though the 20,300 is actually higher than the going rate that they mentioned for your job, whatever hairdressers are getting in this country, then even then, because it's lesser than the general salary threshold, you don't qualify and you don't get any points. You don't qualify at all. That's it. You have to have a minimum of 20,480 to even qualify and get to the next page. So below 20,480, you are not qualified at all at that point. So now let's look at the same two scenarios for new entrants, because new entrants, the salary thresholds are lower. So we already talked about what a new entrant is, so we're not going to repeat it. But the new entrant, if the going rate is about 25,600, let's use the same two examples, right? IT project manager, the going rate is 40,000 pounds. So when the going rate is higher than 25,600, the only value that matters is the 70% of the going rate, which is 28,000 pounds in this scenario. As long as you get about the 28,000 pounds, that's it. Nothing else matters. Whether it's below the 10-point salary threshold, or whether it's below the going rate, or 90% going rate, 80% going rate, nothing matters. So you already get your 20 points from your new entrant criteria, which means that any salary above about 28,000 pounds automatically qualifies. So even if you get to 71%, like even if you get 28,100 pounds, you still qualify and you still get the 20 points and you still get the visa. The only scenario where you will not get the visa is when your salary is below the 70%. So like for example, the 27,000 pounds salary, you will not get it because it's less than the 70% of the going rate, regardless of whether you're a new entrant, because you don't meet the minimum salary threshold of the 70% going rate, you won't qualify. Let's look at the same example for scenario 2, where the going rate is less than 25,600. Again, we'll take the hairdressing option where going rate is 19,300. Because the going rate is less than 25,600, the going rate and the 70% doesn't matter anymore, because all that matters now is the general salary threshold, which is the higher of the two. So at the moment, the going rate is irrelevant for you. All that matters, the only value that matters is the general salary threshold, which is minimum of 20,480. So as long as the salary is about 20,480, even if it's 20,500, 20 pounds higher than the general salary threshold, you'll still qualify. And because you get the new entrant 20 points, you automatically qualify. You don't need the salary points, even if your salary points is 0. But if your salary was 20,300, even though it's higher than the going rate of 19,300 for a hairdressing manager or a salon manager, you still don't meet the general salary threshold of 20,480, so you don't qualify. So even if you're a new entrant, nothing else matters. You still need to get a minimum of 20,480 pounds for you to qualify. So hopefully this Excel was clear. So I think I've answered most of the questions that people had, most of the common questions that people had, and also the salary threshold is a little bit easier to understand now, and I will share this Excel file in my description, the link in my description. Also the common questions and answers that I had typed out in that Excel, I'll also share that list of questions and answers as well in my video. So again, if you still have any questions, do ask me the questions, but hopefully this has answered most of your questions. So until next time, thank you, bye.